What's going on, everybody? Alex Cuesta here, coming at you with this piece from Bloomberg. Trump is making America Florida by Mary Ellen Class. So, what we're going to be doing here is talking about this article and what she had to say. So, let's get right down to it. There's a reason that President elect Donald Trump has tapped so many Floridians to fill his administration. Part of it is proximity. Trump has a mansion in Palm Beach. But more than that, Florida is a breeding ground for the kind of government Trump envisions for his second term, a souped up executive branch that has contempt for institutions, a talent for exploiting the resentment of working class voters, a desire to give favorable treatment to donors, and an urge to aggressively use state power to attack dissenters. So let's get going right away on this with the conversation here. So right away, you read from this that this author is setting you up here to say that Trump is going to be a dictator. That is essentially what they're talking about, and she is saying that Ron DeSantis has been a dictator. You'll see her say that over and over. Do this. So let's kind of go through what Trump envisions: a souped-up executive branch that has contempt for institutions. Well, here's the thing. The executive branch has been getting souped up for decades upon decades, starting back with Woodrow Wilson, really boomed up with FDR, and every president since has been adding to it. So it wouldn't surprise me if that happens. But at the same time, in his first term, Trump was more one of the most states' rights presidents that I have ever seen. So yeah, and a contempt for institutions. If you're a conservative, you should have a contempt for most institutions. They need to be fixed. A talent for exploiting the resentment of working class voters, which is hilarious coming from an obvious leftist, because that is literally what they have been trying to do this whole time is to sow division, use identity politics, race politics, gender politics, female politics, whatever you want to use, any of the critical theories to create resentment amongst the working class voters. If you read Herbert Marcuse, you know exactly what I'm talking about. A desire to give favorable treatment to to donors. That is quite literally every politician. It's not surprising if they get kickbacks. And an urge to aggressively use state power to attack dissenters, which again is rich coming from a leftist. Let's continue here. Florida, which has been under unified Republican control for 25 years, has been the cradle of this type of government. Fueled by an ambitious governor and a Republican legislature focused on appealing to the party's extremes, Florida became a fertile proving ground for the culture war battles that ignited the MAGA movement and the authoritarian experimentation that followed. Jesus, run on sentence right here. What is going on? That is a terrible sentence. But what she's complaining about here is that in Florida, there has been Republican power. And with that power means that they can push along the agendas of Republican governors when you have the legislature behind them. So, yes, they have been pushing along that agenda. Now, when Jeb Bush was there, Rick Scott was okay. But DeSantis has been much better in terms of pushing along conservative values, especially culturally. So, the fertile proving ground for culture war battles and ignited the MAGA movement and the authoritarian experimentation that followed. Authoritarian? Again, coming from some people who want the state to expand and be massive, basically creating rule of law to protect people, which is what you're going to see she's complaining about here, is just ridiculous. Let's keep Proud Boys. Moms for Liberty is home for more Jan 6 rioters arrested than any other state. So Proud Boys or whatever. I don't care about Gavin McInnes' former group. Moms for Liberty is absolutely dope. You hear me talk about Moms for Liberty on here all the time. We interviewed Tina Deskovich and Tiffany Justice. They are fantastic. So to include them in there is ridiculous. Two broad trends that have made all this possible in Florida, and their dynamics that are gradually reshaping the rest of the U.S. as well. The first, changing demographics plus a heavy dose of inequality. Let's keep going here because that's just a setup. Florida's population is older and less white than most of America, putting it a decade ahead of where the rest of the country is going, which is hilarious, right? Because you would think for leftists, less white that it is, that there's less white people, the more they would vote for them. But they have not in Florida. Quote, every election, pollsters come to the state to do focus groups and test their messaging, says Susan McManus, professor emeritus at political science at the University of South Florida. Because of our diversity, you can plop it into any metro area and get about just whatever demographic you want to look at. And then she includes some graphs. The white population has shrunk in Florida. In 2010, it was 58%. 2020, now it's 52%. In the US, it was 63%. Now it's 57.3%. Um, Florida's has aged faster in the US. Percentage of population age 65 plus. 2010, it was at 17.4%. 2020, it's now at 21.6%. Obviously, has to do with many of your snowbirds now moving down there via COVID and things like that. That is definitely part of the reason why 2020 they saw a boost. In the USA, um, the average age of population over 65 is at 13%. And in 2020, it boosted to 17. Now, we knew this was going to happen. We knew that we are reaching the birth replacement rate is getting, to a point where um, that we are not going to be able to replace ourselves properly, that the baby boomers were one of the biggest generations. So none of this should be surprising for anybody that pays attention. Next paragraph here. Florida today is also economically more unequal than most states. Okay, so right here it's right along the U.S. average. So it's kind of funny there when you look at that graph. That's because a handful of states, Florida among them, have become a playground for billionaires and magnets for retirees, even as those residents rely on the labor of foreign born and low wage workers. And it has this graph, the most unequal states, ranked according to Gini coefficient. I don't know what the Gini coefficient is. I've heard of it before. But where I live here, New York, which is a leftist bastion, is by far the worst. And then Louisiana's bizarre, but I guess it's because they have a heavy poor population and I don't know about their wealthy. Connecticut's another leftist bastion. Massachusetts, another leftist bastion. California, another leftist bastion. So the top five are all big leftist centers. Then you have Mississippi, you have Florida, the US average in Florida are right there. Illinois is another leftist bastion. New Jersey is another leftist bastion. And then you have Texas, which their pockets of leftism are probably where you're going in that, because you look at the cities that have been turned purple, they're all a bunch of leftists and they're a bunch of the rich leftists that move from Cali and other places. So she's complaining about her own people here. Keep going. At least 46% of working Floridians are so economically strained and housing poor that they can't afford many basics. The state's average cost of living exceeds the national average. Housing in many cities is among the most expensive in the nation. And although Governor Ron DeSantis promised to lower property tax insurance rates, since he first took office in 2019, rates have doubled. Now, again, you dealt with COVID and a whole bunch of things with insurance and stuff like that. So I don't know the real reason for that. And maybe she's right that he hasn't done what he said he did. But to sit here and talk about how economically strained and stuff like that, I mean, that's the whole country. The whole country coming out of COVID is economically strained. Jobs were very rare and weird. There was a really bizarre time, and I'd like to see how they've rebounded. Because if I go to this link about the 46%, you can't access, I'm not allowed to access the doc. So when you go in there, you can't even see what she's talking about. So right there, you don't know if it's actually true or not. Next paragraph. Trump and DeSantis have chosen to take advantage of these demographic trends by stoking anger and resentment, including among many of the 22% of Floridians who are immigrants, then vaguely promising to improve the economic status of everyone, from tax avoiding billionaires to the working class. Voters believe them. So right here, like, it's so funny because usually when the leftists want to attack something, they can only attack like the racist white man. And it's like right here, they have no choice because Florida has such a massive Spanish population that they can't deny the fact that this is minorities that are actually supporting this in a very high level. You talk about the Cubans, they did not want anything to do with the leftism and the communism that they saw was coming. So again, she is complaining about the people that she probably vehemently would defend. And, a vaguely promising to improve economic status of everyone. It's like pot calling the kettle black here, because all someone like her would want the leftists to do, which is what they have done, is make promises to give you handouts. And those handouts are never enough. So you rely on them. But let's continue here. The second reason Florida is a harbinger for the rest of the US has to do with the explosive growth. 2/3 of all Florida residents come from someplace else, and more people moved to Florida during the pandemic than any other state. And let me say about that, because it's one of the freest states around with Governor DeSantis. They wanted to go to freedom because it was a place that didn't stay on lockdown. It wasn't super draconian. So it's not a secret why people went down there. Let's keep going. Those shallow roots mean that the cultural isolation and social media echo chambers that are now polarizing America's politics have long been at work in Florida, effectively undermining any shared commitment to the common good. And again, this is leftist talking here, because when you talk about the common good, to who? To who? If you talk about America, you talk about all the different cultures, what's considered good to some is not the same to all. There's different cultures. And I'm sorry, the common good comes from individuals doing their part and kind of, everyone doing their part and doing what they're supposed to do and being able to trust that your neighbors and the people around you can do that. And then when you're all doing your part, the common good occurs because everybody gets taken care of. Let's keep going. In the state's dispersed cities and gated communities, engaging in community politics is rarely a top priority for newcomers or snowbirds, which makes sense for the snowbirds to not get involved, right? Because if they're just coming there and going back, they don't care. The newcomers have to get acclimated. The decline in local journalism and a lack of independent sources of information also make holding elected officials accountable harder than ever and has contributed to the nationalization of Florida politics, a trend that is also now beginning to engulf the rest of the country. So quickly, I want to make everybody laugh here because she talks about the decline in local journalism. When you click on the hot link to that article, now remember, we are talking about Florida. When you look at this tab, it's a tab about New Mexico. It is about New Mexico. So even right there, that is an absolute hyperlink that she uses to try and prove her point because there's nothing in here about Florida. I don't know if I could click on Florida and figure it out, but this is all New Mexico. Maybe if I click like there, but her tab, I would have to do the work here and scroll down to see about journalism. Okay. Like it's insane. It's ethnic outlets. Like, what is this that she is trying to prove here? So, again, it's going to show that is a nonsense link that she included to make it seem like she had a point. Um, let's keep going here. In this environment, the connective tissue and shared values that traditionally knit generations together simply never get a chance to grow. That's why Florida long ago discovered what most of America now knows. People are becoming more isolated. Now, again, people are becoming more isolated because we all have our phones, we all have social media, and it's the new wave to just kind of sit there and just disengage and only engage online, whether it's gaming, regardless of what it is, whether it's dating. It is such a different world, and that has nothing to do with people moving down to Florida. Let's keep going here. So it's no surprise that Florida has become the epicenter of Trump's brain trust. His chief of staff and his nominees for Secretary of State, Attorney General, and National Security Advisor are all Floridians, as are several key public health officials. They've seen this movie before. In 2010, Florida elected as governor a first time politician and disgraced executive Rick Scott. Again, it's an opinion piece, so she's allowed to include her opinion there. And in parentheses, the Republicans' healthcare company had been fined for committing the largest Medicaid and Medicare fraud in U.S. history, something Scott, now a U.S. senator, calls political persecution, which it probably was, if we're not going to lie, because if he was able to go to senator as well, especially being a Republican, there had to be enough people that realized it was nonsense. Spending nearly $78 million of his own money, Scott's televised-centric campaign was run by Susie Wiles, today Trump's pick for chief of staff, and also worked on his 2016 campaign and 2020 campaign. She leaves that out conveniently. It's not like he just picked her out of the blue. But then a little-known Jacksonville political hand. Scott's margin of victory was narrow, as are most gubernatorial and big elections. But he promised to fix Florida's economic woes, and voters were willing to give the newcomer a pass on his past, as America has done for Trump and for Biden and for so many other people. So they're loving the single out here. When the pandemic hit, Florida proved ripe for grievance politics. State Republicans, fortified by effective polling, grassroots outreach, and a ton of cash, tapped into the angst far better than Democrats. They used it to expand the executive branch and weaken other institutions. And it's like, you look at this right here, and it's like she's complaining because she's saying that Republicans beat the Democrats at their own game. That there's a Republican in DeSantis that is actually using the power of the state that is granted to him within the law to do his job. And she's pissed that he's actually doing it because most of the time Republicans get in and don't do anything. So that's why she's mad. Let's keep going here. We're almost done with this article. And in 2022, partisan gerrymandering dramatically expanded the Republican advantage in the state legislature. Again, something that Democrats and Republicans both try to do, making it seem like that the gerrymandering is only one-sided. If Democrats could have it their way, they do it. They do it all the time everywhere. It's a battle for both parties. These lawmakers are so secure in their majority that, although they routinely pass laws that put the interests of the donor class over the public's, they rarely pay a political price. Again, that was just purely opinion. If you agree with her on her side, you probably agree, but that's purely speculative. Working with the authors of Project 2025, which, mind you, they came from a Republican think tank and a conservative think tank. So, sure, these people are going to be working because they're also a part of other major institutes on the right. DeSantis and legislatures radically revised education policy, upended freedom of speech, and increased government's role in business and personal health decisions, while systematically silencing dissent. Florida has effectively transformed a governing democracy into a state-heavy autocracy. If Trump follows, here's what to expect. So again, this is basically, she recaps everything that DeSantis basically did here, and it's a whole lot of good stuff, which is amazing. Um, Student performance will suffer. In the last 5 years, Florida expanded school voucher programs, allowed for armed teachers, barred sociology courses in higher education, diversity programs. So let's talk real quick about that one. When you click on that link, all it does, it didn't bar sociology courses and higher education diversity programs. What it did was it basically said that sociology should not be a core competency in the universities because sociology is not a core class. Or it's all it does. Sociology is still available at higher universities. It is now just not a required core class, which I agree because sociology is pretty useless. If you don't, being a sociologist is a pretty low paying profession in terms of the collegiate professions, unless you have your own practice and you grift hard, basically. Don't get me wrong, there's a place for social workers, but not as many as we have now. And it's still offered. So again, she lied there, 100% lied. And in higher education, barred diversity programs, he did bar a lot of LGBTQ and stuff like there because it wasn't effective. I'm pretty sure kids could still take it, but if it wasn't like explicit things like that, like I don't know. Supported book bans in schools. So again, supported bans on, not like they're going to tell you it's LGBTQ, but explicit graphic novels where they were showing kids basically sex acts, teaching kids how to make grinder accounts and things that shouldn't be in schools. Again, in schools, in public schools, libraries. It's available in public libraries, all this stuff. If you're a parent and you want to let your child read it, you can get a library card and go do it. But to have it in schools, he wanted that stuff out, rightfully so, because it was indoctrinating nonsense. And feuded with College Board over its African American Studies course. Meanwhile, students' test scores have declined every year since DeSantis was elected. 10% of all public school teachers have left the profession, and schools began another year last fall with a massive teacher shortage. So let's break that down real quick. It's declined every year. He got elected in 2019, y'all. What happened in 2020? The COVID pandemic. So then it was shut down. Everything was online for a while. He was one of the first ones to get kids back in school. So I would love to see that expanded nationally, to see how all kids have done nationally. There was a decline nationwide. It's not just Florida. And I feel like Florida is probably doing better in terms of bringing that back up because their kids got into school much quicker than the rest of the country. Georgia, South Dakota, there was a few of them that really just brought them back pretty quick once they realized this wasn't a threat to kids. COVID was not a threat there. And to talk about public school teachers leaving the profession and a shortage, that is, again, a nationwide thing. A lot of teachers decided to retire during COVID because of the risk that they perceived. And teacher shortages are there because the people don't want to go in and be teachers anymore. They don't. It's a big thing. And I don't know if Florida has a bigger thing because they're holding teachers accountable, which is, if you're a good teacher and you're not going to teach the nonsense, you should be fine. But it just goes to show that the indoctrination is more important than teaching kids. Let's go to the next bullet. Freedom of speech will be dismantled in unprecedented ways. The passage of heavy-handed Stop Wrongs to Our Kids and Employees Act, Stop Woke Act, in Florida restricted public schools and private employers from talking to students or employees about concepts like racism, bias, and privilege. Because study after study found that when you do that in the workplace, all it does is create division and make a hostile work environment by default. So yes, that has no business being in there. No business. That should be enacted nationwide. That should be an act of Congress that should be done. And to talk to students about it, here's the thing. You can't put it into your curriculum. If people read, they're going to call it the Don't Say Gay bill. You'll see it here. You cannot discuss it as a part of your curriculum. That is not stopping you as a teacher if you're a homosexual teacher, if you're whatever. And if a student comes to you in confidence, post the education, post the curriculum, you are still allowed to have conversations with that kid. It's not like you can't sit there and have to go, well, can't talk to you ever again. So again, they misconstrue everything. The law known as the Don't Say Gay limited discussion of LGBTQ plus issues. Um, okay, that's a bad sentence. Other laws compelled speech by forcing unions representing public sector workers to distribute anti union propaganda and prohibited social media companies from suspending the accounts of politicians who promoted violence. So, right there, again, anti-union propaganda, what does that mean? That they're a right for work state? Okay, that they're talking about that we are right for work. Okay, that's part of their prerogative. And politicians who promoted violence, words, they're saying things that maybe are violent. Like, come on now. This is, the leftist dream here. Next bullet. The administration will reach into private businesses and personal lives in ways never seen before. DeSantis took the unprecedented step of using the powers of his office against school boards, cruise lines, Disney, universities, doctors, race studies, local governments, and what he called activist corporations. Really good stuff. Really good stuff there because universities, doctors, race studies, other local governments that were crossing the lines, yeah, school boards, yeah, they should be going to battle with them when they're not doing their job, when they're going out of their way. Um, and it's been seen by a lot of places rolling back their DEI initiatives. Now, I'm still wary of that, but rolling back their DEI initiatives on their face. This untrammeled executive power is enabled in part by Florida's courts, which are increasingly reluctant to hold other branches of government in check after DeSantis followed the advice of a secret panel, quote unquote, of legal advisors headed by Leonard Leo and installed a supermajority of conservatives on the state's Supreme Court. So, oh my God, the executive, which has the power to um, put put judges that will uphold the Constitution and agree with. Oh, wow. Again, would she be complaining if a bunch of leftists were on there and they were sitting there and going full bore with the LGBTQ agenda, with the critical theories agenda? No, she'd be championing it. Public health will worsen. Florida's officials now intrude in decisions that rightfully belong with families and their physicians about gender dysphoria or a woman's reproductive health. But when it comes to the public's health, such as tamping down on spread of infectious diseases, the state bars putting public safety over personal choices. So here's the thing: she is sitting there saying that she wants the freedom of children suffering gender dysmorphia to be able to cut their body parts off and stunt their puberty. That is what she's saying disguised there, okay? Because nobody cares about gender dysmorphia in adults 18 plus. No one cares. When the gender dysmorphia becomes a problem is when you are allowing children to get sex change surgeries and take puberty blockers. So again, hiding it there. In women's reproductive health, abortion is a battle, and it is the state's prerogative if they want to bar abortion. That is what Trump did when Roe v. Wade was overturned. It made it the state's prerogative if they wanted to bar abortion. And that's exactly what is happening there. And they didn't even bar it. They gave you, what was it, 6 weeks, 12 weeks to have the abortion, which is in line with most European nations, might I mind you. And most European nations force the women to undergo some sort of appointment with a psychologist before they can even consider it. So let's go there because I know the leftists love going to Europe. And then tamping down on the spread of infectious diseases with the public health, the state bar is putting public safety over personal choices. So because they give you freedom to make your own decisions, that's bad. Again, this woman who is complaining about state power being overrun also wants the state to force you to do things. Let's go here and let's read the hypocrisy. DeSantis named Dr. Joseph Ladapo, an outspoken vaccine skeptic, to be the state surgeon general. He is the only state health official in the nation to mandate that vaccinations be voluntary and that fluoride be removed from all drinking water. Again, vaccinations being voluntary is a good thing. Fluoride being removed from drinking water, I don't know that much, honestly. I'm not in or out on that. I've heard bad things about it. But if I want to add fluoride to my diet, it actually should be my choice, right? Why should daddy government be telling me to do it? There's enough things that I can figure out a way to add fluoride to my diet if I think that it's positive. His vaccine opposition has led to a decline in kindergarten vaccination rates in Florida and an unprecedented increase in avoidable childhood illnesses such as mumps and measles. And the thing is, number one, I don't know about the deaths from mumps and measles. So we need to find out about the death count amongst kids. As much as it sucks that people are making those types of choices, the pendulum will swing back around once they realize that they're harming their kids. And again, if this becomes a situation where enough people are harming their kids, the pendulum will swing. Well, here's the thing. I agree with a good amount of the childhood vaccinations. I am questionable about the fact that kids get like 80 something vaccines in their youth, but I am mostly in agreement with most of the vaccinations. So again, that's my choice as an adult, as a parent, to do with my kids. Last bullet here. Government will use money and power to silence opposition. Pot, kettle, black. DeSantis removed two state attorneys for disagreeing with him and used state resources to harass citizens and undocumented immigrants. So again, he removed two people that work for him for agreeing with him. They work for him. They work for him, okay? He can remove them all he wants. It's an executive branch. They work for him. So yeah, if they're not going to do what he believes should be done as the executive in terms of executing the law, he's allowed to do that. Duh. And then harassing citizens and undocumented immigrants. I'm sorry, it's not harassing undocumented immigrants. It is getting them the hell out of the country because they don't belong here. They are criminal aliens. So that is awesome. Okay. He intimidated broadcasters and spent more than 20 million of health and transportation money on ad campaigns, attempting to defeat a citizen-led ballot initiatives on abortion and marijuana. So, okay, as the executive, if he's allowed to allocate that money via state law, then he did. And if that's what his constituents voted him there to do, to be anti-abortion, to be anti-marijuana, then he is doing the bidding of the people that voted him in. Elections have consequences, right, Barack Obama? And when voters approved restoring felons' voting rights, he worked with legislators to undercut those efforts. Again, going by the ideals of the people that voted for him. Neither DeSantis nor the Florida legislature paid any political price for these misguided policies, according to her. But the result is a balkanized state, a place with plenty of sun but little soul. Grievance gets more oxygen than compromise, and money goes farther than votes, which is hilarious talking about balkanization because if they had more sanity, there would be less balkanization, right? So that's my opinion. And that's their opinion too. If we were less crazy, there wouldn't be all this. So again, we come at an impasse. And the problem is, and I'll tell everyone it is, that Ron DeSantis just doesn't back down and he fights. And that's the issue. They're mad that whenever leftists get any opposition, they just whine and complain like this. Let's get these last two paragraphs done. DeSantis was unsuccessful in his attempt to make America Florida by running for president in 2024, but the country is already well on its way to Floridification. That's a hard word, but I said it. Many of Trump's impulses, his attacks on diversity and education, his desire to use his office for retribution, which is crazy funny considering that's what Biden did to him, his embrace of vaccine skeptics, calling out RFK there. His urge to crack down on dissent and centralize power. That centralizing power thing is hilarious. That's what they dream of. And Trump has never shown any signs of trying to centralize power. He was too lenient during COVID, a lot of people said, where he let the states do what they want and should be seen as a growing first in Florida. If Florida portends the future, Americans ought to take a closer look at what that really means for their individual liberties, their pocketbooks, and the fabric of their communities. So that is that article right there, everybody. So once again, I'm Alex. This is what we're going to be doing, a few videos like this, hopefully daily, to come out and read some important news sources and things like that, like opinions or different news articles that I think are important that I want to get out there. So I appreciate everyone for watching. If you liked what you saw here today, please make sure you go over to YouTube, The Alex Cuesta Show, and you subscribe and you like there because you'll be getting more videos like this, plus our live streams that we put on there and our awesome guests and interviews. So I appreciate everyone for watching, and I'll be back next time. So long, everybody.